This is Living Catholic with Father Don Wolf. Living Catholic is a fresh look at issues confronting each of us today. This show deals with living Catholic, what that means for Catholics, as well as the impact on the rest of society. You certainly don't have to be Catholic to enjoy this show. And now your host, Father Don Wolf.
Welcome, Oklahoma, to Living Catholic. I'm Father Don Wolf, pastor of Sacred Heart Parish and rector of the Shrine of Blessed Stanley Rother. Father Stephen Jones was ordained yesterday at Our Lady's Cathedral. It was the culmination of his studies for the priesthood, studies he began more than 8 years ago when he entered Conception Seminary after his time in college. After 4 additional years of theological studies at the North American College in Rome, he has now achieved the rank of Priest of Jesus Christ, and we congratulate him on his achievement. I was ordained almost 45 years ago in a ceremony identical to the one Father Stephen underwent. It's an ancient rite in the Church and has been the gateway into the life of priestly ministry for all these years. Over the decades, I've had the chance to learn something about what I said yes to all that time ago, and as my days in priestly ministry now stretch out behind me, I have some thoughts for Stephen as he begins his ministry. I thought it'd be helpful to send him a letter detailing what I've learned from my time in the ministry. Not all things are as they appear. Priesthood is no different in this respect than any other human experience. It's much deeper, much more expansive than can be imagined at first sight. I'd like to share a bit with him about its true meaning and what he can expect from it now that he has entered it. And so, here goes. Dear Stephen, congratulations on your reception of holy orders and the ordination to the priesthood. There is a wonderful relief in knowing that you have now arrived at that destination for which you have prepared yourself for all these years. I hope you enjoy this culminating moment. There's nothing quite like it. Take heart. You've entered into the greatest possible calling from the Lord to bring you happiness and to invite you into the hallways of holiness. That's the first thing to keep in mind. God has called you to this. You can trust the divine guidance to bring you to the fullest revelation of the truth of your life and of your faith. While the future is unknown to you and exists in mystery, it's also in the realm of God's accompaniment and God's blessing. What you will encounter and what lies ahead for you is directly a part of God's plan for your saving promise. While there remains all manner of questions and all measure of uncertainty, you need not worry. God has brought you here for your holiness and has opened your life to the promise of true joy. Embrace the prospects that you've been promised. And the first truth to celebrate is that you're entering a brotherhood of holiness and history that is remarkable. Even a cursory glance at the life of the priesthood in Oklahoma is enough to be proud of belonging to it. We've been surrounded by extraordinary men whose intelligence and commitment and abilities have been unparalleled. When talking about my cousin, Blessed Stanley Rother, I used to joke that while all men who are ordained to the priesthood invoke the presence of the saints, we sing the liturgy of the saints together while the ordinand is prostrate in front of the altar just before the laying on of hands by the bishop. I say, I had a saint in my ordination since Blessed Stanley Rother was there. But the truth of the matter is less singular and more supportive than my attempt to get a laugh at my ordination. I think that all the ordinations of Oklahoma have had saints present. None of those saints were recognized or celebrated for their holiness or witness, but there's never been a shortage of extraordinarily holy priests in our diocese, and you have now joined them, surrounded by them yesterday at your ordination. The second invitation is to cast away fear. It's easy for me to say that, I know. I can look back and see how empty my fears and anxieties were. But I can say this to you because I can look back and see the foolishness of the worries I carried with me all these years. Don't be afraid. God has brought this vocation to you. You've been called to the priesthood of Jesus Christ. What else need you be concerned about? Just as Jesus walked through the pathways of his ministry in Galilee up to Jerusalem, so he will accompany you on your pathways through the highways and back roads of Oklahoma. In the Acts of the Apostles, those who saw the risen Christ received the assurance that the work of God was going forward through them. You can go forward through your ministry with the same promise. Remember, the days of the apostles and the age of miracles have not ended. They're still among us. I've seen over and over the miracles of God at work in His church. Trust that you will see the same as well. But more than this, you need not worry about your failures or your frustrations. They will eventually provide you with as many blessings and joys as the successes and the honors you will learn. This isn't a mystical promise. It's a practical sentiment. If God has invited you into the fullness of life in Him, then it will be a life filled with all that God's accompaniment will bring. Remember, God will make use of all your strengths and talents to achieve the divine will in your ministry, and these will sharpen your appreciation for the power of God at work in the world and create in you the deepest sense of gratitude and joy as you see your life flower. But God is also perfectly able to achieve the divine will and all the blessings in your life with your weakness and inability as well. One of the great blessings of the priesthood is that your talents and latent abilities can be shaped into a unique contribution to the life of the church. There have been so many men who had no idea they were gifted with administrative and leadership abilities that have dwarfed their contemporaries. Men who had no training in architecture or design who have contributed immensely to the beauty and elegance of church life here in Oklahoma. And not a few of us have found ourselves at moments in which we had no idea what to say or do, but found ourselves inspired to do and to say exactly the right thing at the right moment. You are the repository of all the gifts that God can bring to bear for His people, and the Spirit can ripen them into the greatest gift to be given to His people. But God is not limited to your talents and abilities. The divine can bring about the blessings of the church as fully by your weaknesses and mistakes as much as anything else. It's not nearly so celebrated and not nearly so anticipated, but God's goodness can sprout through the cracks of the most broken vessels and bear fruit for all of us to enjoy. And think of this. There is no limit to what you're not able to do well. Your life has an infinite supply of weaknesses and mistakes. If we trust in the divine at work in us, we can be happy to know that we can bring so many gifts to God for His use. And as a corollary to the capacity for God at work in your life, don't worry about recognition. Of course, it's important and all of us crave it because we all need it. Just know that the great work of the priesthood will be to bring the presence of Christ into the lives of those most in need of it. And when you do, it will bring joy to those who encounter it, and it will bring joy and completion to you. And for the most part, the greatest of this joy will take place among the invisible and forgotten corners of the life of the church. Seeds can be planted with all recognition and anticipation, but they sprout in the dark and grow from the soil. As long as you remember this, you'll be able to rejoice in what is so often passed over as mere dirt and dust. Take one example. The foundations of Hispanic ministry in our diocese were laid by 3 men whose names have been forgotten. When they began their work, they chose to do what they could to respond to the people in their midst. No one thought they were leveraging the future of the entire Catholic Church by their actions. But these men, Fathers Joe Kolb, Joe Berger, and Wade Darnell, they changed the life of the church in Oklahoma. As they worked in their parishes, they became aware of people in need who had no one to respond to them, and in their pastoral work, they strove to make a place for them. 2 of these men didn't even speak Spanish, but their desire to care for these people outpaced their personal weaknesses. All we have done since then, in all of the resources and notoriety that this ministry has summoned, is to supplement what they began. The work of ministry is not one success built upon another. It's one faithful try followed by another faithful try. Many of the initiatives taken in the work of the church have been equally invisible and just as powerful. The Cursillo movement, for example, came to Oklahoma in 1979. It began at the parish in Anadarko and over the years has stretched out to include almost every parish in the Archdiocese outside of Oklahoma City. For decades, it's provided the teachers and leaders for the developing ministries of parishes throughout the state. And all of this took place invisibly. There were no offices, no budget, no telephone number, no stationery, and no salaries. And yet this imperceptible work has provided for the spread of the gospel to thousands of people over the years in our diocese. It has never been notable or celebrated. It's only been effective. As long as you're willing to face the first challenge of priesthood, bringing Christ among those places and into the lives where he is absent, you will have fulfilled your first priority. What will be most important is that you have the promise that as you are faithful to the vocation you have been given, Christ will become present in the lives of those whom you encounter. And speaking of the people you'll encounter, it's important to remember that it is the people of the church who are the object of your concern. In the end, it's they who count. Programs and budgets, hierarchy and authority, regulations and norms, all these things are important in their own place. But we should never forget they're only at the service of the people of God. They don't exist for themselves or apart from the life of the church. It is the church, the people of God, that must be our first concern. Jesus walked among the people to teach and preach and heal and to free in his ministry. The kingdom came in his ministry, but to them. This can be frustrating. They are all people just like you and me, which means that they're up and down, uneven and uncertain, fearful and timid, and brave and idealistic. We might wish they were more dedicated and more capable. In the words of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, we might wish they, quote, looked more redeemed, unquote. But in the long run, they are the way they are. And as the flock who is entrusted to us, we have to strive to serve them. As Pope Francis has commented, we are to have the smell of them on us as their shepherds. Father Richard John Newhouse called this the thus and so-ness of ministry. What he meant is that when we're doing ministry, we can't allow ourselves to lose the thread of what we're doing by wishing the folks that we had were different. They are the way they are. The invitation is to work with whom we have. The Spirit will open up what's hidden among them and provide to us what is missing. The goodness of God will be at work in them as we strive to serve them in their needs. Eventually, we'll all be surprised at what we can become and what they can do. This surprise will also be as true with you as with them. You'll be invited to discover abilities you did not know you had and to find weaknesses that are new to you. The work of ministry is to give yourself to them so that the true presence of Christ will be found in you. You can't stop and rearrange the people in your parish while you're working to get things done. A surgeon has to work on his patients while they're still alive. A mechanic can stop everything and unbolt and rearrange and restart as he overhauls everything. And you're more a surgeon than a mechanic. The heart of the parish has to keep beating while you're at work. Now, in all of this, being a pastor is the best job in the church. There are a whole lot of bad jobs in the church. I'll let you find out about them on your own. But it's a pastor's church. You become the fulcrum around which the life of the faith is enacted and sustained. All of the reflections on the state of the church can float around in academia and in the halls of the Vatican. The Chancery office can be filled with agenda and suggestions, and books and documents can be written dissecting the possibilities and the pathologies of our world situation. But all of the vaporous truths they contain condense in the lives of the people of your parish. And when you get to be the pastor, you will lead them into the mystery of Christ. Savor the possibility and look forward to the promise. It's the greatest work anyone can do. And remember, in all of this, Christ and the gospel is out ahead of you. Fred Craddock described this experience as he got to his first parish. With all of the excitement, he mounted the pulpit on the first Sunday and announced to everyone that he'd come to bring the message of Christ to his parish unstintingly and unreservedly. He was, in his sermon, staking out what his future would be in this new place and what his vision for all of them in the parish would be. Christ had arrived, he assured them, because Fred had arrived. As he was receiving the regular first Sunday compliments from the people in the parish, there was an older man whom he noticed at the edge of the crowd. And when everyone else finally had left, their good words ringing in his ears, this man, this stranger, approached him. And he came up to him and simply said sharply, "Just remember, Pastor, Jesus got here a long time before you did. So it is for all of us. In fact, we can look forward to the truth that the work of the church has already brought the presence of Christ and the gift of the Spirit into the parishes we enter, often in surprising ways and at surprising depths. This means that we can look forward to encountering Christ in our parishes, not just bringing Him to them. That's what the missionaries discovered in Santiago Atitlan when they began to mature in their ministry there. The parish had been without a pastor for 100 years before the Oklahomans arrived, and the piety of the people was mixed up with all of the notions and practices of the Mayan culture. But in all of this, the can-do Yankees discovered that there was a powerful awareness of Christ's presence there, a presence that humbled their pieties and assurances. We can all look forward to being surprised at where Christ will appear to us. In this, treasure what you see first. It's easy to enter the life of the parish, any parish, and quickly become blind to the possibilities that might lie there. Become aware of what glares at you when you first arrive. Write down what makes you feel odd or what you notice as strange, and keep track. In a little while, what's regular and common, no matter how shabby or strange, will begin to feel normal and unchangeable. It's helpful to keep in mind a bit of what you see first. As you grow in experience, you'll know what can change and what won't change. You'll know what you need to change and what you need to maintain. After a while, you'll be able to read a parish and its possibilities as easily as you can read a speedometer or a budget. But there's the gift of first sight that should stay with you. This is especially precious to you when you first begin. I encourage you to write it down, maybe in a letter to yourself. I know it sounds like a gimmick, and maybe it would be if it were just busy work, but there's really something to it. Think about all you want yourself to be and what you'd like to see in your parish, and then store it away. Come back to it after a year or two and take a look at it. It's okay if you laugh at what you wanted and what you've gotten. It's also okay to be reminded of what you first wanted and what you've settled for. Both of them are good for gaining wisdom about yourself and about your situation. Oh, keep your cards and letters from your ordination, too. This was the advice of my spiritual director when I was ordained. I didn't do a lot of the things he suggested, but I did do that. Well, all I had to do was throw them into a cardboard box and let them set until I was ready to look at them again. I carried them around for a good while and finally did look at them about 20 years later. They were a gift to me. I had forgotten who'd come to the ordination and all of those who had wished me well. I dismissed the good thoughts and the good wishes of so many people had for me. It was refreshing to read their prayers and their good intentions for me and my future again. Those who love you want to love your priesthood and your place in life. At this same time, with all of the acknowledgement and anticipation with which you enter this life, we also acknowledge that your journey has just begun. After these years in the seminary, you're ready to close this chapter of your life and enter a whole new one. You've now achieved the moment in which you can begin to understand the priesthood that you have said yes to. But it's just the beginning, which makes it exciting. It's also a little unnerving. After all the years of preparation, the years of preparation were challenging and exhausting. There's a lot to be said for having gotten here. It's somewhat of a letdown, but not to savor it a little more fully in the light of all that is yet to come would be a tragedy. Now, there's nothing unusual. Certainly, this is not reserved to the priestly life. A young second lieutenant just commissioned from West Point this year is now looking around at his first command, wondering what will be required of him. He's anxious to see if he has the true markings of the officer he has prepared himself to become. No matter how enthusiastic he's been in his years of study and preparation, he's still wondering just exactly what his commission into command means. And the young couple who've just said "I do" to the great questions about commitment and promise, they're just beginning to discern the bare outlines of what a life together might bring to or demand of them. No matter that they've been seeing one another for years, they've just gotten started. It's the same for you. Don't be concerned. After all, a beginning is just that. All that we search for lies in the darkness of unknowing. If we already knew, it would be in the light. We have to go into the darkness to find what we're missing, which is the reason for the journey in the first place. It's also the source of the drama of life, the meaning of what we're here for. So lean into the mystery. It's what life is for. And one final admonition. You'll fail. This is a hard truth to face, but it is as real and as predictable as the sunrise. The greatest priests of this archdiocese have failed in what they intended and what they wanted. Both what they wanted of the church and from their parishioners, as well as what they wanted of themselves. The holiest of these men that I have known embraced their failure and built on it. It was one of the sources of their faithful service and became one of the strengths of their service. In many respects, all of our lives will turn out to be less than we thought they would be. Of course, this will also be the beginning of finding a life greater than we imagined. It's often the case that our hearts are broken so that the light can pierce the darkness there. For all of us, this is the moment when we can begin to trust at the deepest level and know the goodness of God for the gift it is. Your priesthood will be a gift. It will be the greatest gift to you. There are 100 more things to say. This is because priesthood is, first of all, a life in Christ. And as a life, it will grow and develop and change and become what you could never imagine. So look forward to it. It will not be the greatest blessing you could imagine. It will not be as small as that. It will be the greatest blessing you could never even have hoped to imagine. And it will be for you. So give thanks. God has called you to this life. Welcome. Back in just a moment. Welcome back to our final segment, Faith in Verse. We have a poem today called Hail. There is the ancient greeting we use when we imitate obsequy, saying, for example, Hail Caesar to someone noted for authority, and are content to know it's old, part of the cache of words unused, except by those who mine for gold among the pits played out and abused, who love to resurrect tired names so as to remind of other days, breathing health into the lame, walking on old, untrodden ways. Not to be confused with real hail, the ice that falls from the sky, as summer sun and heat inveigle freezing temps from June and July. Oh, hail all hail as it comes, as words play on the public stage. Meaning surrounds us in some and often runs wild, uncaged. Yet we sort out immediately what is intended and meant. Words fly by so fleetingly, yet we gather their real intent. You could say our minds are hale and hearty, alive to nuance, but you might condemn to hail those who lack congruence and suffer the modern dearth of intricate possible meanings and stifle all true hope at birth that there could be other leanings. That's hail. The gift of living Catholic is the gift that we have the chance to encounter the fullness of life in Christ. That's what that is the promise that we've been given and what we hope to achieve. I hope that as you join us in the weeks to come, that we can explore this together.
Living Catholic is a production of Oklahoma Catholic Radio. To learn more, visit okcr.org.